We're going to call this meeting to order. Yeah, sure.
I have to use the gavel.
We're going to call this meeting to order. Today is Monday, April 8th, and this is a regular school board meeting. And we're going to start with roll call. Janet, please.
Charles Black-Lyons.
Here.
Reed Campbell. Tom Hagelin.
Here.
Sue Curran.
Here.
Ruth Nelson.
Here.
Bob Nystrom.
Here.
5 to 6 present.
Now we do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. We're going to start with the approval of the agenda as amended. We have a number of changes here this evening. We're not going to ratify the bills tonight. That will be done on April 15th. The action item for the new elementary and the purchase of the purchase agreement is being postponed to either the 15th or the 22nd. And
well, and then when you look at the Harrison Elementary project, there were a couple errors on the bidding sheet, and there are clean copies available here with the adjusted amounts. The first one, gotta make sure I got the right one here. The first one for Harrison Elementary School, on the third page where it talks about acoustic ceiling tile, you'll see on the revised sheet, must include 5A, $21,200 for gym acoustical treatments, and 5B, which is cafeteria acoustical treatments, for $8,900. On the revised sheets, they are on there, but those are the changes then to the Harrison project. The number actually equals out. It just was a couple oversights on that one. Then if you look at number 4, the award for low bids to Thielen Roofing and Heating, there is a change there as well. And that sheet is also, the adjusted sheet is with you. And under the base bid, let's see, for scope, under ventilation, 7A is no longer there. It's just alternate number 1, expanded gymnasium. And that is, we have the base bid and then the alternate number 1 for $39,000 for a total of $1,371,000. So the whole amount for Thielen would be, instead of $1,633,400, it's $1,629,000 even. So there's not the, it's right here on the second page. So $1,629,000 on the second page. But the sheets that were just handed out have those revised numbers. There's also a spare copy for the public to see. And Janet, yep, I got one for you right here. Good there? Yep. So those are the amendments as of this moment.
thank you.
Yeah.
Move to approve the agenda as amended.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. We have a first from Director Hagelin and a second from Director Nelson. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? Motion carries. District recognitions.
Yes, we have 2 district recognitions tonight. I'd like to begin by saying congratulations to Minnesota United States pageant winners. Miss Minnesota United States is 2015 Brainerd graduate Serena Schreifels. Miss Teen Minnesota United States runner-up was Brainerd senior Alea Jean Root. Miss Preteen Minnesota, United States was Brainerd 7th grader Gabriella Miller. Miss Little Brainerd, United States was 4th grader Lauren Hand. And Petite Miss Minnesota was 2nd grader Clover Elstrom Stevens. Congratulations to each of our pageant winners. Congratulations also to our future problem-solving team representing Forest View Middle School and Nisswa Elementary School. At the state competition held on March 30th, 2019, the 7th grade Forest View team of Scarlett Anderson, Vanessa Anderson, and Lindsay Neifert placed 2nd in the Middle Division GIPS competition. The 7th grade team's superior work earned them Minnesota's 4th invitation to the international competition. The 5th and 6th grade Forest View team was Owen Bearns, Drew Klein, Fern French, and Matt Simpson. They placed 2nd in the junior division of the GIPS competition. And 4th and 5th grade Nisswa Forest View team of Abby Isaacson and Ariana Sandbakken from Nisswa, and Callista Anderson and Ava Capel of Forest View placed 5th in the junior division presentation of action plan competition and 3rd in the Global Issues Problem-Solving competition. Congratulations to each of our future problem-solving teams.
That's great, thank you.
Yeah.
Moving on here, public input is the next part of our meeting. I'm not sure if there's anybody who wanted to come and talk to the school board here. We welcome your comments. Seeing no one, we'll go ahead here. Building project update. Brandon, Chris, Marcy, Lord, and
Me? Yeah.
Chris will not be joining us this evening. So reviewing the bid results, we've had a busy month here for the Brainerd School District. We've had Nisswa Elementary, Forest View Middle School, and Harrison Elementary under bid. Last week we opened up Harrison, and the week before that we opened up Nisswa and Forest View. Collectively, the projects are under budget as a whole, but we'll cover Nisswa later. That one was a little bit higher. It was higher than our estimates, so we'll talk about that a little bit more in detail as we move forward. So again, Harrison was under budget with all the alternates. We had a great turnout, 35 bids we opened up last week, and we had 45% of the contractors are within a 60-mile radius of the Brainerd area. So really good turnout for some local bidders. So what we have here is later we'll be asking for motion on the bid recommendation letter. And I don't want to run through all of the contractors on here. You can see them attached onto the bid recommendation letter. But I do want to point out one thing. Work Scope 2, the concrete bidder, had rescinded his bid. He had an error in his math error. And so we're recommending that we move forward with the next low bidder, who is K. Johnson Construction, who turns out to be combined with the concrete and masonry package to be the low bidder. So by losing TNT Aggregates out of Grand Rapids, it goes to K. Johnson, who put in a combined bid for concrete and masonry. So that's really kind of the only wrinkle inside of the bidding documents. Again, good local turnout with Anderson Brothers being local here in Brainerd, Thielen in Brainerd, and then again, just 45% of the contractors being within a 60-mile radius. So I think very good turnout as far as that goes. We were able to accept all of the alternates for Harrison. We were worried that it was going to be over budget, so we had a number of alternates on that project. To come in well, so we're able to accept all of them, including the expanded gymnasium was, I think, the largest desire of the board, so we were able to fit all that in, so fantastic news. Any questions on Harrison?
What were the other alternates besides the?
I think we had 10.
Oh, it's the roofing?
Oh, yep, so alternate 1 was the expanded gymnasium. Alternate 2, I believe, was that the roof?
I believe that was the roof.
Alternate 2 is fully adhered roof.
Yep, that was the fully adhered roof. 3 was replacing the cafeteria windows. Alternate 4 was adding some upper cabinets above the lockers in grades 1 through 4. Alternate 5A and 5B was the amendment to the bid recommendation letter, and that was adding acoustical treatments in the gymnasium and cafeteria. 6 was the gym bleachers. 7 was control contractors, who we're looking at that piece collectively once we open up the new Baxter Elementary. Our desire is to see if we can use the same control contractor across the district, because it would really get cumbersome having a bunch of different control contractors. Right now the control contractor is JCI across the district. But we'll look at that collectively and determine if it warrants moving forward in a different direction. So we did, right now, Johnson Controls is the base bid in the mechanical package. And we'll look and see if we need to make any changes in a future board meeting to see if we want to, see if there's any money savings there. Alternate 8 was an alternate manufacturer for gym flooring. 9, actually alternates 9 and 10 were some cost-saving measures to the flooring that we're not accepting, because we're able to utilize the terrazzo flooring in the project. So basically Harrison's getting everything it wanted. So fantastic news there. Moving on, Forest View. Again, that was under budget. We received 7 bids total for that. Smaller projects, we didn't receive as many bids. But 100% of the contractors are from Brainerd and Baxter area. So full local contractors there. So great news with that as well. And again, there's a control piece aspect to that. We'll look at that one again after we open up New Baxter. Moving on to Nisswa. So this one was over our initial estimate. We've been directed by the board members and oversight committee to bring the project to within budget. So we've been working diligently over the last couple weeks to present a bunch of options. I don't know how many options we presented, 20 or 30. We started narrowing them down as to what was desirable by the district. We met with Lane, we met with Molly, and Earl. We went through a lot of these options and started to narrow them down. We do want to bring this, we've had a few more developments since we met in oversight last week, so we want to bring this back to oversight tomorrow and discuss some of these options and make sure we're moving down the right path. And then we'll have to come to the special board meeting, I think it was April 15th.
It's next Monday at 11 o'clock.
Okay.
If that time works for everybody. Yeah.
Okay, so then we'll recommend moving forward with the selected options by the oversight committee at that time. And in these options, in my mind, they're no-brainers. We went through them again today with Lane and Molly. They're just financially responsible options. It's changing some material suppliers and some selections. It's just stuff that really doesn't impact the project, really, when you look at it. We're not removing big pieces of the project. We're just making a few little changes to save some money and get the project back within budget. So we're pretty excited about that as well. And then moving forward, the new elementary bids tomorrow at 2 o'clock. So we're keeping our fingers crossed on that one. Received some good bids. We've had a lot of interest. Everybody's pretty excited. It's a new project on a new site, and they're pretty desirable for contractors. So we're keeping our fingers crossed on receiving some good bids on that as well. Moving forward, I just want to talk about the next round of projects. So we have Garfield, Riverside, Lowell, and Baxter Early Childhood currently in the schematic design phases. Don't really have anything to show the board right now. We're working through a number of different options. Each project is quite fluid right now, working down the spaces in the schematic design. So again, I just want to remind the board of the process. We have the core design group is where we do the bulk of the design. We bring that design to the oversight committee for approval and recommendations, and then we continue to develop that, and then we bring it to the board. So we're currently we're just in the core design process right now, and we'll as we start to have more developments, we'll start to talk about more of these projects at the oversight level. But right now we're planning on roughly trying to get through schematic design by the month of May. So if we can try to get that done before school gets out and get most of the input we need from the core group, that's our desire. One may lag behind a little bit more than the other one, but in the end, we're looking at having the construction documents complete this fall and hopefully hit the bid market to be one of the first projects out for next year and try to bid it in November, December of this year. So we're hoping we can push that forward and get some really good bids by being some of the early projects out. So, any questions on building project updates or the board bid recommendations?
An update on the high school, please.
Oh, yes, skipped right over that one. So the high school, our plan was to present the design development drawings for final approval today. We started digging into that more in detail last week. There's still a few bits and pieces that aren't quite ready yet that we need some more input. MnDOT has some requirements that we're trying to work through. So a lot of this stuff is laying in the civil part, but depending on where it ends up, could have a budget impact. So we just don't want to put the cart in front of the horse and ask for approval on something that might be changing. So really, once we get through the design development stage, we really should be locked into our changes and our input session, and it really should just be the design team moving forward with the construction documents and just getting the work done. So still a few bits and pieces there to be ironed out, but we're hoping we'll assess again this week, and hopefully maybe we can present that on April 15th as well for approval. So, questions?
Brandon, explain why Harrison is below, but Nisswa's higher. Is it the same? I'm just curious.
I wish I had the answer to that question. We've been digging through one of the bid categories that was higher than our estimates on Nisswa, was a general construction package. And a lot of these value engineering ideas are coming out of there, and some of it is just manufacturer stuff. It may have had a little bit higher end, I guess, if you will, materials specified. But again, so Nisswa is a little bit smaller in scale, so our cost per square foot is going to be a little bit higher. And also, thinking back, Harrison, we also reduced the civil scope quite a bit by having to reduce all those properties. We cut all that property acquisition in half, roughly. So our civil number also went down quite a bit as well, so we saw that result on bid day.
So that plays into the...
Yes, yeah, that whole, I think it was the east side of the project. We're not doing any parking lots or any modifications there now, so that also definitely contributed to it.
Okay.
Yeah, we were kind of surprised.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we were thinking Harrison was going to be the messy one. We were worried about that one from day one, but it turned out great. And we did hit it pretty hard early on. We met early with the oversight committee, and when we were getting fearful that it was coming over budget, and again, the directive was given, get it in budget, so we spent a lot of time on it.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. I'll let,
Parsons go.
Marcy, you want to give an update on Jasperwood?
Real quick update. We were hoping to have agreements for you guys to approve tonight. However, we did get one of the agreements today that we want our legal counsel advice on, so that's why it's being held until next week. We hope to get those comments back, and then there will be an agreement for you guys to approve. So the gist of it is the land purchase, and then also a assessment agreement and a developer's agreement that will be coming forward.
Mm-hmm.
Any questions?
It'll work out well, too, because we can bring it forward on Monday, the 15th, and then the city council will bring it forward on Tuesday, the 16th. So it should be actually very good timing, so.
Correct.
Great.
Yep.
Thank you.
Next up, the approval for the tax abatement hearing and the regular school board meeting on March 18th. Is there a motion?
I'll move the approval.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. We have a first from Director Nelson, a second from Director Nystrom. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. The consent calendar. Hearings. And then keeping in mind that we're ratifying our payment of bills on the 15th.
And why was that? Not ready.
It wasn't on board book yet. Marcy's still working on that.
I'll move the approval of the consent calendar as amended.
Thank you.
Second?
Thank you. We have a first from Director Nystrom, a second from Director Haglund. Any further discussion?
The field trips are part of this, correct? So, has the school district, or the schools that do these field trips, do they look forward or to where they're going in terms of crime reports and I think like the Clery Act, that type of thing? Has that been discussed at all with the high school? Meaning that when they go forward, they pull crime statistics of the results where they're going. But small potatoes perhaps, but as a parent, I know that's a concern of mine when we're sending students off.
Well, I remember one of the first board meetings that you were here, and you talked about the reports that you can get at colleges and such regarding some of the crime reports and things. And I had asked them at that time if that is something that, you know, that they always look into. I know many of our trips that we have are with touring companies, that it's large groups. They go to areas that they believe are safe and such as well. So I'm pretty sure if Andrea was here, she would say that yes, that they look into all that, but we can double check that for sure.
That'd be great. I just feel more comfortable with that instead of putting a third-party
Yeah.
for-profit organization, assuming they're gonna double-check that type of stuff.
But all of the trips I know that are on tonight are with different tour groups. Yeah, the Vamanos Tours is where the high school choir is looking through, and that is a tour group, so. But we can certainly check on it.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Site reports. Brainerd High School Student Council update. Okay, we have Max Durkow and Hannah Casey. Probably massacred your name there.
So I'm Hannah,
I'm Max.
and we're from the Brainerd High School Student Council. Currently, one of the projects that our group is working on is wrapping up the prom, considering that this will be this Saturday, held from 8 to 11 at the Northern Pacific Center with an optional march through Grand March from 7 to 8.
And now we have made a committee for our Spring Fling Pet Fest and Week, which will be our last week for seniors at the school. So we have dress-up days to come up with. We have a few things planned for the Pet Fest, getting kids and maybe even teachers involved with something fun, and as well as our Warrior Warehouse Committee. We're going to be putting together a video just to raise awareness for it, because there's a lot of kids that don't know where it is since it was moved, or don't know the purpose or what's going on with it. So that's what we have planned, and we're meeting this week.
And then to wrap up our Spring Fling Week in May, we have our freshman class cabinet sponsoring a lunch jam in our courtyard during A&B lunch, which is an opportunity for all of our service organizations at the school to have a fundraiser and bring forth food to sell for the students during lunch.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have fun at prom this weekend.
Thank you.
And we have the OPEB presentation with Jill Erdahl and Marcy Lord.
So I'd like to introduce Jill Erdahl. She's with Hildy Incorporated. She does all of our actuarial studies. Maybe give a little background of your history. She's been doing it for a while.
Yeah, I think I was here years ago, probably when you were at the point where you were thinking about issuing the OPEB bonds, maybe for these liabilities or not. And I can't say I'm from the Brainerd area, but by marriage, I have, my husband's uncles were both retired teachers from here. So anyway, so some connection, I guess, to the Brainerd School District too. So tonight I'll give you the overview on your updated actuarial evaluation for your other post-employment benefits that you'll offer here at the Brainerd schools. So we aren't talking about any public pension benefits tonight, but it's all the post-employment benefits that reside within your contracts, and mainly post-retirement medical, dental, or life benefits that you offer to your employees if they meet certain eligibility requirements when they retire. So you do have 2 reports. All of the benefits that reside in the GASB 75 report are the post-retirement medical, dental, life benefits. You will find a second report, and sometimes that's a little confusing, but those are also post-employment benefits, but the Government Accounting Standards Board, or GASB, wants those to be disclosed differently. So you really have 2 disclosures, but they're all other post-employment benefits, and again, not the TRA or para-public pensions, but post-employment benefits. So OPEBs, and then some other benefits that are disclosed under GASB 73. So again, we're charged with calculating all of your district's liabilities, and then of course coming up with the required disclosures for you. So you have to follow all the expensing rules for these post-employment benefits. But as a district, you are left up to how you wanna, pre-fund, fund, what your policy is on funding, what your investment policy is on that OPEB trust that you have backing up your liabilities. So all of your funding decisions can be made here at the district. You don't have to necessarily follow any funding or pre-funding rules. That's left up to you. So all the expense exhibits are in our reports that you have to use, but again, how you pay for the benefits when they come due is left up to you. So with that, we can jump into the presentation that's in your materials. So again, I'll just give you a quick overview of what your OPEBs are here at the district. There's a lot more information in the full actuarial reports if any of you are interested in that. So if you want any more of the details, you can ask me or Marcy of course at any time if you want to dive into any of the details. I'll give you a little background on the kinds of post-employment benefits you have, talk about a little bit of our process, and then I'll give you the highlights of the actual results from the most recent study, and then we have just some highlights too on updates on funding policy considerations, and then of course there's a possible annual OPEB levy, but because you are so well funded with your OPEB trust, that's not a possibility for you right now, but I'll highlight it for you because oftentimes though you'll be at conferences and you'll hear your colleagues talking about it. So we'll cover that too, just so you know what's available out there. So if you go to slide 3 now, we'll hit your, let's say, larger or your bigger bucket of post-employment benefits first. So they're referred to as OPEBs, other post-employment benefits, so really public pension benefits. And they're disclosed under GASB 74 and 75. Those are just the statements that house the rules. But again, we're really talking about post-retirement medical, dental, or life benefits. So you really have post-retirement medical benefits in most of your contract groups in the contracts. Most of them are a pre-65 kind of style subsidized benefit, so you pay for a certain amount of the premium for a certain amount of years if they meet eligibility requirements. And all of those types of direct subsidized OPEB benefits now have been sunsetted, meaning there's like a higher date clause. I think kind of the dates range from 2009 through 2012, so you had to be hired before those higher dates to be able to be eligible for those benefits in the future when you retire. So there are sunset clauses in place on most of this style of benefits. And then in Minnesota, there's a statute on insurance continuation, though that everybody's eligible for, regardless of whether you meet those sunset clauses or not. So in Minnesota, once a public employee retires, if they meet certain minimum eligibility requirements, you have to offer them access indefinitely to your medical and dental plans. But the kicker is you also have to offer them the access at the same group or blended premium rate as your active employees. So as an early retiree, it's really a deal. So we mathematically figure out how much of a deal that is for them to be able to stay on your plans. Even if they'd have to pay that whole premium themselves, that premium is really a deal for their age. So we figure out what is their true cost running though versus the premium they're paying. That's your first OPEB benefit, or it's called a hidden subsidy or an implicit subsidy. And then of course we add on to that though, how much of that group or blended premium are you paying directly and for how many years? Those two pieces are what form your OPEB liability here at the Brainerd schools. You do have a few subsidized dental and life benefits in just smaller pockets, but the bulk of your liabilities in the post-retirement medical benefit area. So you have in our most recent study, whoops, sorry, Marcy, I took a breath on you there. We had 931 active participants and 102 retirees in the evaluation. And I know Steve would always kind of give you updates on how many were in that grandfathered group in the, that meet the higher date restrictions to get the subsidized benefits. So that is like kind of a shrinking group. So a couple years ago, that was at 556. Now it's down to 476. So 476 have the ability to get the direct subsidized benefits when they retire of the 931 active participants. Any other questions at all on kind of the basic statistics or the benefits at all? No? Okay, now we can go to the, so on the next few slides, we don't have to go through these in detail, but I just want them here for you in case you want to look back for further information, or especially the implicit rate subsidy tends to be a little more confusing for people that benefit than, getting part of the premium paid for a certain amount of years. So slide 4, I just gave you an explanation of that hidden subsidy or implicit rate subsidy in words. Then on the next slide, if you're more of a numbers person, here's an example of that implicit subsidy with numbers. So here I'm just showing you what that might look for a 60-year-old retiree. So they're running about $1,174 in claims monthly. But yet if they're meet the eligibility to stay on your plan, they choose the access. If they wouldn't be getting any of the premium paid for by you, but had to pay it on their own, they'd be paying about $784 a month. So you can see it's about a $390 a month deal or benefit for them, hidden subsidy we call it. As a retiree, you maybe aren't feeling that you're getting a benefit, but if you'd have to go to the market on your own and be age rated, you'd be paying closer to some, higher amount than that group or blended premium rate. So that's just an example of how we calculate the implicit rate subsidy for one 60-year-old, but of course we're calculating that for all of your current retirees, and then all of your active employees we're charged with, what may their implicit benefit look like in their retirement years, but then we have to bring that back into today's dollars, of course. So we're doing projections and bringing them back for a current liability. The next slide just gives you another picture. So your implicit liability really develops in that blue early retiree box for your district. So again, we're charged with looking at what do actual claims costs run for retirees, and that they run typically at an angle. So as we age, typically our costs tend to increase for medical, but yet you have to offer the premium or cost on that flat line, a blended or group rate. So again, your liability develops in between the angled line and the flat line in that early retiree area for the implicit. So again, we take the implicit, add it to your direct subsidized, or how much of the premiums are you paying, and that's what forms your liability. The next slide, there it is. This just kind of gives you a quick summary of the process that we go through. So we gather all your specific district data from Marcy and her group here. We of course gather your OPEB trust or the asset information. And then we look through all of your employee contract groups, because OPEBs in Minnesota, post-retirement medical benefits, tend to be very different from one district to the next. So it's all very individualized to one district to the next. So just when we think we've seen it all, or we've seen every kind of design or possible OPEB benefit out there, we find something different. So we have to look at all of your provisions, and then we take all that input data, we do our number crunching on it, or the actuarial black box, and then of course we get all the results that are included in your financial statements or the disclosures.
And that black box comes with a fee.
Yeah. Nothing compared to the new elementary schools or the other projects.
On your previous slide, you showed
Yes.
an implicit benefit for post-65, but I thought at 65 it ended.
Well, yes, that's correct. So that chart is there, but so that's why I said most of your liabilities in that blue early retiree box. Some entities may have an implicit liability still post-65. Our assumptions for your district are that once somebody, most of your subsidized benefits end at Medicare eligibility. So then at that point, and because there's so much more available in the market for Medicare supplement types of coverages, So either people enroll in Medicare, and then because Medicare is sharing a part of the claim cost, we don't have that implicit as much anymore. But then more importantly, they tend to move off of your district plan to a Medicare supplement plan there's just more, there's more attractive, priced plans out there than there is for pre-65 retirees. So yeah, we don't have any post-65 implicit subsidy for you because of that, but in some instances we do. Yeah, in some places we do.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, now to get to the good stuff. So about slide 8, here's the general results from your most recent valuation as of July 1 of 2018. So it is for your 18-19 school year. And again, these are just for your GASB 75 or your OPEB benefits, but this is the bulk of your liability. So GASB really focuses on that actuarial accrued liability. Now, under the new disclosure rules under GASB 75, they've changed the name of that on you. So I've kept it at the same name, accrued liability, here for you. But if you look at the reports, you'll see they're calling it now total OPEB liability. But don't let that throw you off. The mathematics is the same underneath. But your accrued liability is $19.7 million. And you can see of that, 6.8 is that hidden subsidy or implicit benefit. So then the remainder is your direct subsidized obligation here at Brainerd School, the difference between those two. People always want to know what the split is on the 19.7, so that's why we give you that there. Other things to keep in mind here on your liabilities, we always show you the present value benefits in the actuarial report. You won't find it anywhere in your financial statements, and GASB doesn't ask you for the disclosure, but sometimes people will focus on the accrued liability and they'll think of it as the ultimate liability. But as your employees continue to work each year, they kind of earn more towards their OPEB benefits for that future service. But then, of course, you're paying some benefits off to retirees. So the accrued liability is a moving liability, but it's not just going to go down necessarily from the 19.7 because it is volatile and it's based on claims and premiums, so which can be volatile. And of course, we have assumptions on where those might go, but they might be higher than we think or less than we think. But so we always like to remind everybody that that 19.7 isn't the ultimate liability. The present value of benefits includes, for example, for Marcy, not only what she's earned, put into service so far at Brainerd Schools, but what we think she'll put in up till her point of retirement too. So it's really a total service obligation liability, but GASB says, tell us only what's been earned by Marcy and everybody else to date. That's what we wanted to know about, and that's what the accrued liability is. Other measures that you might really be interested in, so that expected benefit payments for this year is about $2 million. So that's the actual benefit payments that'll go to the retirees, but that consists of some direct subsidized and implicit benefit payments. And the breakout of the report is in the report on that expected benefit payment number. But again, that's about what your actual benefit payments will be this year is $2 million. Any questions at all on the OPEB liability?
Is that $2 million, is that kind of average or normal for our size group as far as the payout, expected payout?
In Minnesota, because all the OPEB benefits developed at the districts differently, kind of for one reason or another, and, benefit packages develop differently, so there isn't really, there's some geographical pockets that we can kind of see with designs or typical liabilities, but yours for a large district like yourself isn't necessarily unusual. It's not unusual for any of the school districts to have OPEBs. Most do, and most have direct subsidized obligations too. And most have those started or have sunsetted them just like you have too. Yeah, so pretty typical for your size of district. The good news for you is really the next part of it then too. You did issue back when there was the window to issue OPEB bonds to back up these, well, back then it was GASB 45. You may remember that number of liabilities. Now they've updated the disclosures, GASB 75 liabilities or OPEBs. Now you have backing up though that $19 million of accrued liability, you have $23.3 million of assets in that irrevocable OPEB trust. So you're 118% funded as of July 1, 2018. So in a very good funded position, so that would be very enviable from a lot of other districts. Some districts have already, their OPEB trust that they established has already run out. So they're handled very differently at one district to the next. Yours has developed well because of some of the strategies you took early on in the early years. But as I was, updating Marcy too, it's not, 118% funded can look great, but with OPEBs, because they're so volatile, you don't want to be too overfunded either. So, we've been working on that to say kind of withdraw as much as you can here over the next few years, because you don't want a reviewer to look at your financial statements and say, well, those monies could be used kind of elsewhere. So you want to have a good funded percentage, but it doesn't have to be 100, or over. So just keep that in mind, that you don't have to be overfunded, but OPEBs are volatile too. So, there's no magic number, let's say, because we don't really know, will we see some losses developing in the next few years, or will we have gains? So, but again, you don't want to get too much overfunded because you do need a benefit payment in the current year to substantiate a withdrawal from that trust. So keep that in mind. So, at some point, let's say you're 125% overfunded and you're like, hey, let's take a chunk of that out. Well, you can't unless it's an OPEB benefit payment. So we can't just, well, you could create some, but most don't want to do that. But, so keep that in mind too.
The last time we did this, what was our percentage of funding?
It was higher, so, and I.
So we have decreased it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It was not overfunded last time, as far as
No, I think you had about 5 million or something of overfunded last time, and this time's at 3 million, if I'm roughly remembering the numbers right. So you've brought down the,
We made a decision to use more of it as we could, so.
Yeah, which is prudent, yep.
Mm-hmm. And that 2 million number, the direct subsidized benefits, comes directly out of the trust, and then the implicit amount we pull from their actuarial study. That's how we've historically
Yeah, and the
done
2 million included the implicit.
I
So,
think originally we didn't take all of the implicit.
Correct.
right, so for a number, I think in the early years, when you got the assets, and quite a few districts did this, if you remember, it's kind of a perfect storm. So you got the monies for these OPEB trusts, it was maybe at the end of 08, early 09, while the market was at a bottom. So you got, the monies at that point. Then you had the choice, districts were left with choosing, do we want to move into some equities, or do we want to stay fixed income with those assets? All of your other monies are, you have to stay within the statute 118A within your investment choices, but with this OPEB trust, you were given other options. You didn't have to stay in just fixed income. So you did move into some equities, so you weren't withdrawing in the early years for benefit payments, so kind of trying to make that trust last longer. And then your investments did well. So that's kind of how we find ourselves here, but could have gone the other way too, which, and my hair's silver already, so I hope it never goes that way, but yeah, so, so it was kind of a perfect storm in the positive direction because, investment returns were good after that, kind of when you got the assets, and then the decisions you made to go at kind of were in that same direction. So I think that's historically why we find ourselves in here today too. Yeah, so of the 2 million in benefit payments that you're expected to make this year, about 1.4 is those direct subsidized benefits, and then the remaining 600,000 is implicit benefits. So, and you'll find more of volatility in that implicit number because it's based on claims and premiums, which are harder to predict.
Does it do any good for us to norm ourselves or to compare ourselves to other school districts our size? To find out if we're running and gunning, or?
Well, you could, you'd have a better funded position than I think most districts in the states, or maybe a couple similar to you, is you only have that 118% funded. So other districts that made similar decisions to you to set the trust up, move into some equities in the early years and not, make full withdrawals from that trust, find themselves in a similar position to yours now because of just the experience that happened during those years. In comparing yourself to other, OPEBs, those aren't really benefits that you can change easily within the contracts because of collective bargaining, and they tend to be a very important benefit, to employees. And then the irrevocable OPEB trusts, those monies can only be used to pay OPEB benefits. So you can compare yourself, but it's not really anything you can change too easily. Yeah, but, and mostly you would be in an enviable position, and if you were an employee here, to get a good OPEB benefit probably is better than what you'd find at most other districts.
Thank you.
I'd want to be a math teacher here in retirement if you didn't have that sunset clause in place. But yeah, so, And OPEBs, aren't a bad thing to have because it does allow somebody to retire before that Medicare eligibility, whereas, when you have that conversation and you're at the retirement point, that tends to be a person's biggest decision maker and not how are they going to pay for their health care to bridge them to Medicare. So it's a good benefit to have to help with manageable retirement patterns at least. The next then bucket of post-employment benefits is a smaller one liability-wise for you, and it's just a different disclosure rules. But because they're not mandatory post-retirement medical style benefits, they fall under GASB 73 disclosures. But here they look like pension-like styles of benefits, but they're accrual of certain days per year of service multiplied by a rate when they retire. And then, of course, your matching contributions that are made on 403B contributions are subtracted from those. So there are really some smaller net payouts at retirement in this style of post-employment benefit. And because these are only housed in a couple contract groups, there's only 29 participants that have these style of post-employment benefits here at your district. So again, a lot smaller liability too that goes with these post-employment benefits. So on the next slide, you can see here your actuarial accrued liability is only $148,000 as compared to the $19 million we looked at for OPEB. So again, just a disclosure requirement here that you have to separate these out, but there are other post-employment benefits also. Now the last couple slides just to highlight that the new disclosure rules, that you heard about probably for your public pension share now under GASB 68, and now for the OPEBs under GASB 75. GASB really moved or changed the rules because they wanted to highlight that they wanted you to think about your funding policy at the district level and really drive it from here. A lot of public entities under the old rules used that, I don't know if you remember that old ARC calculation housed within the expense rules, but they'd use that or they'd rely on that for funding also, but had very long amortization periods underlying it. So that's kind of why the funding got behind on some liabilities. So they've kind of cut that out. There's no more ARC anymore. And so now, you just have to have your own conversations and have a written funding policy for these OPEBs. So they just are trying to make that important by cutting off that ARC and not having an ARC calculation anymore. So now they call it actuarially determined contribution, but that's really driven from your funding policy. So we get calls all the time to say, where's that number? But it really comes from your funding policy, and then we can give you some options. But again, you don't really have to have one because you're overfunded right now or have more assets than liabilities. But at some point in the future, if that switches, then you'll want to look at, do we need to make a contribution this year above and beyond our benefit payments? So just keep that in mind. And then again, you'll be in an enviable position here amongst any of your colleagues at conferences. They may be talking about that they do this annual OPEB levy. But again, because your assets are greater than your accrued liability right now, MDE doesn't allow you to, in essence, to double dip, they call it. If you were underfunded, so let's say if your assets were only, let's say, 10 million, to your 20 million, we could look at levying for possibility like approximately $1 million, so half of your benefit payments for the year, if you were about half underfunded. That's how the rules work. So that's why we put here for you. You can't use this annual levy here this year either because you're overfunded. So it's really good news, even though it kind of looks like bad news. The rules changed for this levy so the window closed on being able to issue OPEB bonds without voter approval years ago. Now you can still issue OPEB bonds, but you need voter approval. When that rule changed, that's when they added this possibility annual OPEB levy. But they put some rules here too. So they said, well, you can annually levy for now some of these liabilities, but you do have to have sunset clauses in place, and you have to be underfunded. But that's when this came about, was when the rules changed on the OPEB trust from not needing voter approval to now needing it, and that's when they added that. So you probably got more information than you ever wanted probably on OPEBs, but do you have any questions at all?
Is GATSB just used for public schools, or is it also used for county or city governments?
Yes, so we do the same mathematical calculations for cities, counties, water districts, some public cemeteries, some public hospitals. Yes, and then we do the same mathematics and disclosures for corporations too for their OPEB benefits.
So Jill, what do school districts do that did not take advantage of that window 10 years ago?
So they're really in a pay-as-you-go funding strategy.
So a lot of times they're underfunded, probably.
Yeah, or if they didn't issue OPEB bonds at all, some of them, maybe have been just setting monies aside, trying to build up somewhat of a, trust on their own without issuing OPEB bonds, but most of the time they're a pay-as-you-go, meaning, so let's say if their benefit payments were $2 million this year, they would just be budgeting for that $2 million out of their general fund.
Okay.
And some are mixed or blended districts, partially funded, kind of partially pay-as-you-go, so their general fund pays for some, trust pays for some. Some have, their trust has run out, so they're back to their general fund paying for it. So they didn't continue to pre-fund their trust, they just drew down on it, because you could only issue OPEB bonds up for your accrued liability. So again, that's not the end-all liability. So if they didn't kind of keep adding to that, but again, in the early years, you didn't make with the withdrawals, so you kind of were making contributions to it too, in a pre-funding pattern there for a number of years.
It's my recollection when those bonds were issued, they were 13-year bonds. So those will be coming due in 2022. So what happens then?
We just refunded those, so now they're, a part of our facilities plan was to refund those, so now it's extended out further.
Oh, okay. I didn't know we could do that. Okay.
And I would just like to commend the board and our past administration, our current administration, for how well we manage this, because this is a good benefit for our taxpayers, that we were cautious and made good decisions. So back then.
Thanks, Steve. Thank you, Steve Lund, for that one.
Yeah, like I said, OPEB benefits are a nice benefit to have when, an employee's coming up on retirement. So it's usually your biggest question, where am I going to pay for my health care? And it's expensive as an early retiree at that age. So. If you have any other questions at any time, you can always call me, and I know Marcy's, available too. So, and then there's a lot more information in the actuarial reports if you're having trouble falling asleep at night.
This was a great summary, thank you.
I figured you would maybe just want the highlights, and I always tend to talk even more than I thought I was going to, but if you have questions at any time, you can call us.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we need Mr. Murtha here. District response to the Native American Parent Advisory non-concurrence report and survey data on BHS digital learning.
Good evening.
Good evening.
2 board meetings ago, it was shared with the school board that the American Indian Parent Advisory Committee had voted non-concurrence on the curriculum instruction and cultural portions of the recommended plan. And there was some confusion about what were the district's obligations and how or to what extent we had met them. So as part of the statutory response within 60 days of addressing those concerns, I've brought forth some data and information for you. And I'm going to break it into 3 components. The first component are the 4 recommendations for the 2018-19 school year from the American Indian Parent Advisory Committee. Then I'm going to address concerns that were expressed by the presenter around curriculum and student discipline being the third. Those last 2 portions are not part of the 2018-19 or the 2018 recommendations, but they were addressed in the presentation to the board. So coming to the 4 components of the recommended plan, the committee asked for 4 things and made 4 recommendations to the district. The first one is that the Brainerd Public Schools would host events and guests that celebrate Native American cultures. In doing so, creating pride, belonging, and cultural representation for Native American students while providing an educational experience for all students and staff. This is an area where we had intended to provide staff development through Dr. Anton Troyer in November of last fall, but the district had made a decision in October to make a change to that schedule in lieu of other events that occurred in the district that required the district's response. And that's when we did the social emotional training on the morning of November 27th on the in-service day. The district has provided some opportunities here for students to experience cultural activities. The challenge for us has been they're more primarily outside of the school day than embedded in the school day. So if the intent was embedded in the day, this has been a challenge for us. It's a challenge of scheduling and identifying opportunities. And the principals are putting a little bit of a challenge here. What activities need to exit the system to make room for new ones? Okay, because no one's got a surplus of time in any schedule. But the people are looking at options for that. We find our best opportunities outside of the school day. And some of these are not necessarily cultural events, but they're very important activities that the district has supported. First and foremost is the backpack event prior to returning to school, where students are allowed to come, get a backpack, get school supplies, get things that they need in order to access the curriculum instruction of the school. In addition to that, we provide multiple college visits for students at the high school. And there have been several opportunities for Ojibwe language learning opportunities that are tied to events or committee meetings, public hearings with the American Indian Parent Advisory Committee. So the district is making an intentional effort to address some of these needs and concerns, but there is areas for growth, and that would be trying to embed activities during the school day. The final big activity last year, and it's planned again this year, is the powwow that's co-hosted with CLC in the spring. On item number 2, Brainerd Public Schools is to assist in creating a staffing model for Native American education in which both a Native American education program coordinator, a Native American student liaison work as a team to meet the needs of Native American students. The current multicultural student support liaison position is funded with American Indian education dollars and works exclusively with Native American education, including grants, programming, and curriculum. Native American Parent Advisory Committee recommends that the title of Native American Education Program Coordinator would be most accurate for this job. The committee requests that a Native American student liaison position to focus solely on individual social and academic support be created and funded by the school district to provide direct support to students. What's being asked for here are 2 things. The committee is asking for us to more sensitively name the positions that we have in the program to be specifically about American Indian education and not multicultural. And that was something the board agreed to last year. The committee also asked for an addition of another part-time position to support activities and students at the secondary level. So what we now have is Ms. Inga Britson, who is the program coordinator stationed out at Forest View, and Ms. Sam, who's now stationed at the high school, and they kind of tag team the elementaries together. So we fulfilled this request in full. We've added another position, and we have more sensitively named the committee and the program. Item number 3, Brainerd Public Schools provide more cultural training opportunities for teachers, counselors, administrators in order to equip staff with the necessary cultural lens needed to best serve Native American students. This is an area where we have not been able to fully implement this request. It was originally the intention to bring Dr. Troyer in November. That was a change made by things we discussed earlier. Now, the advent of the snow days and the extended days in the calendar have provided us the opportunity to invite Dr. Troyer back, and he's agreed to do so. So we'll be able to fulfill this, but that was not something the committee would have known at the time that they did their report. So this is something that came to fruition later. Moving forward, we do need to identify other opportunities to embed both the equity staff development and that equity lens in the continuous improvement process for the district. And number 4, Brainerd Public Schools create more support academically for strong Native American students by providing differentiated curriculum materials for students achieving beyond their grade level, as well as creating alternative pathways for students to be identified and accepted into the AGAT program, the Gifted and Talented program. This is an area where, as with all curriculum areas, we are committed to making sure that every student has an appropriate opportunity to participate in the programming and be placed appropriate to their learning needs. We feel very confident that the process and the procedures that we have in place for student identification for accelerated, intensive, and gifted programming are appropriate. They are both legally compliant, they are statutorily accurate, and we are able to use a portfolio process to make sure that no one indicator is the sole indicator that we use for student placement. So this may be an area where we respectfully disagree with the committee at this time. Okay? We welcome further comment and discourse on it. So those are the 4 elements of the recommendations that were given us last year. We clearly are intending to meet in some way all of them, if not to meet, but to clarify where we're at. And we have done that, but we have not been able to grant every request. And as with all the many requests the district gets all the time, it'll be difficult to always do that. So we'll do the best we can. In terms of curriculum, I provided you also a couple of documents that I would ask you to refer to. One is a grid sheet that has grade level standard and then the heading, how are we addressing? There are roughly 12 to 15 specific American Indian education standards embedded in the Minnesota academic standards as they currently exist. And what we did was an inventory of how are we attempting to address and fulfill each of those standards in our existing curriculum. And what we find is either we are covering it with some intentionality and some thoroughness, or we're actually working on it currently. It's just part of coming through the curriculum process where we're at. I'm actually quite pleased of the amount of coverage that we're able to demonstrate. What is clear here is there's been an intentionality by our teachers and our curriculum leaders for quite some time, probably longer than my tenure here, to address and make sure that these things are incorporated. There are a couple challenges that we have. The first challenge that we have in this process is some resources are very difficult to find because they're very specific. And the best example is Ms. Bjorgi and Ms. Person have been looking for 2 years for the perfect resource to talk about tribal government structures in 4th grade. So finding that resource, it's out there somewhere. We will find it. But they're looking for it, but that leveled text that is a 4th grade appropriate reading level that addresses the content that's implied in the standard, it has been difficult for us to find. But again, we've been intentional about trying to do it. Science is going to bring some new standards online as the new science standards get approved this spring. We don't know the final details of that, but it's something that the science teams are aware of and that they're working. The final piece on the curriculum front that I would share is I shared with you a list of culturally appropriate books that are specific to Native American culture that are embedded in the integrated units in the elementary literacy and social studies program. And what you see is a heavy presence of them in 2nd grade, not so much in 3rd, but then again in 4th. And that somewhat reflects the standards. 3rd grade still has some units of study writing that they need to do as part of the curriculum adoption process that we're moving through, and this is something that they've been intentional about. Grade 2, you see significant work has already been done because one of the major social studies units in grade 2 is the then and now unit, which provides the opportunity to look at historical context and how has it existed today, because history doesn't end, it doesn't exist out there in history, it's part of where we're carrying with us now. So that would be the curriculum piece. The final thing I want to address are concerns around student discipline in the demographic data that the district has. And on the demographic data, one of the concerns that was listed was the extremely high rate of discipline actions for American Indian students. And the data I'm showing you is over the last 4 years, the percent of discipline actions for American Indian students constitutes 3.94% of the district's discipline actions. This needs to be laid against the context that the American Indian population in the district for students constitutes a roughly 2.5% of the district population. That number is an interpretive number. If you were to look on the MDE website, the report card website, it would tell you that we have about a 1.8% American Indian student population. But when that number is generated, what happens is any family who identifies as 2 or more races, cultures, ethnicities, that gets pulled into a different category. that we can't disaggregate out. So we know that there are students who may be multiple cultures, multiple races, identifying. They're in that 2 or more category. Now that 2 or more category constitutes 3% of the district. So we kind of look for a happy medium between 1.8 and 3 and came up with 2.5. That's where that number came from. So we're not seeing a significant change, not a significant difference in the percent of American Indian students and the percent of discipline actions. 1.5% constitutes 3 actions difference between the two. That doesn't mean that the district should not pay attention to it. It does not mean that the district should not be aware that this is an issue in other places and we need to do all that we can to prevent it from being an issue when it's not. But that's what the data indicates at this point. The second concern that was leveled was the high placement rate of American Indian students in special ed. At 23.09% for over 4 years, that's, again, roughly analogous to the 22% student placement in special ed district-wide. I am concerned that both the 23.09% placement for American Indian students and the 22% placement for all students is high. And it is a systemic district challenge, but it is a challenge of student placement district-wide. It is not any one group that's going to be affected here. I think if you pulled all our groups, you're going to see very high rates of student placement because we're a district that places high. Okay.
Is that the last page?
That last page will give you that data.
So 23.09 is the Native American population.
That would be the American Indian population in special education on average for the last 4 years.
Okay, and what is overall district-wide, did you say?
Overall is 22%.
Okay, thank you.
The final piece of data that's important demographically to look at is the disproportional representation of American Indian students in poverty versus the district average. The American Indian student population in poverty over a 4-year average is 74.97%, roughly 75%. So 3 out of every 4 American Indian students is in poverty. And the district average is 40%, or 4 out of every 10. So that is a significant disproportionate placement. Oh, it's not a placement, it's a significant disproportionate identifier right there. Okay, so that's what the data says. And I provided you the other subpopulation groups that we frequently look at, both special ed, disaggregated by level, elementary, middle school, and high school. And I gave you the students in poverty data, and I gave you the white uncomplicated poverty, or uncomplicated student data as well. So you've got that data. The district is not in any way denying that there are unique challenges and needs to American Indian students. What we believe is we've been intentional about addressing them, that we have quality plans and structures in place to meet those needs, but there is work to do. We both welcome and need the American Parent Advisory Committee to be partners with us in that journey. There's much we can learn from them. There's much we need their help with. I think together we can do very good things for students.
That was a great report.
Yeah.
It was excellent. You covered every point.
I have a few comments, if I can.
Certainly, absolutely.
Sure. I gotta pull out my glasses again. Apologize.
I kept adjusting mine as well because it's.
I hit that magical age where I need my glasses. Anyhow, one thing, I appreciate the effort, Tim, that you put forth and your team to bring together this information, because first and foremost, I want the conversation that will continue on between the American Indian Parent Advisory Committee, this board, and then the administration to be upfront, to put all our chips on the table, and to always work towards a common goal, which is our students, but also making sure that we're looking at data.
Correct. The administration has absolutely no doubt that we share the common value of helping each student and making sure that we address that.
So, with that being said, just a few thoughts. Is and from understanding what for the rest of the board and Superintendent Larson that I'm walking again at kind of a fine line here. an individual before my seat on the board that was the president or the chair of the American Indian Parent Advisory Committee to now a member of the board. And so I'll try to walk that line as I address some of the comments that you made, which again, I do appreciate. And also one other thing I'd like to share is that the efforts that the school district has made, greatly appreciated by myself as a parent of American Indian students. But with that, just an effort to just to educate a little bit is a few of the items that came out in 2018 with the concerns or the recommendation from the Parent Advisory Committee, really the nature of the education that we wanted to provide the teaching staff, teaching faculty, and administration is that we want that to be an equal priority to other trainings that go on, because we see this as important from the parents. So when the training that was about to happen then got tabled for another training, that had an impact on the Parent Advisory Committee in terms of, oh, this is something that may happen again where something that we thought was a priority, should be a priority, gets pushed aside. Fortunately, and since the last meeting where we discussed this, is Anton Troyer is back on the docket, and that's great. And as a parent, again, that's significant. A few other pieces. One piece that I just wanted to point out with the creation of the new liaison position that has Crystal Sam now in that position, it was also the desire of the Parent Advisory Committee. Recommendation, of course, we understand we don't have a great deal of power or anything like that, but the recommendation that it not just be paid with dollars that are coming to the school because we have American Indian students, but also a good faith effort that the school district will also use some of its, forgive me for my vernacular, but from the general fund, if you will, as well. And that wasn't done.
No, it wasn't.
And that's okay, but that's part of I think part of the question that the Parent Advisory Committee.
It's not identified in the text that's provided.
It says that will fund in the text.
Okay.
But anyhow, but still, it's a wonderful thing and a positive thing that we made it happen. And it's significant, especially when we look back to where we were just a number of years ago, Lane. And that's significant.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to get lost on those details. A few other things real quickly. One of the number 4 piece, and this is something that I've worked to educate and to even gently push is that as it relates to agate, the underrepresentation of American Indian students in agate. So we won't get into that. You and Tim and I have had multiple conversations about that. However, the one reality is that, as Tim had referenced, the portfolio process, and there is a portfolio process for agate, and that's great. Mm-hmm. However, the issue is really with the American Indian Parent Advisory Committee isn't about the portfolio. It's that in order to make it into the lightning round or the portfolio process, the students have to reach a certain score on a standardized test. Mm-hmm. That isn't, or at least in the past, hasn't been normed against American Indian students nationally. So with that being said, then we're putting those American Indians into a bucket where it's really tricky for them to succeed. So anyhow, but the portfolio process is nice, but remember, you can't get to that level unless an American Indian student reaches a certain test score. And that's the scary part, that there's no alternative pathways, and especially as it relates to the American Indian student, especially the American Indian gifted student. It's been researched that and found that American Indian students, they present their gifted and talented aspects much different than a non or a non-Indian student. Just a few more items. So
can I
sure.
Before we leave on that subject, how many do we have in our gifted and talented program? Total kids, roughly.
Total kids, you'd be looking at 21 times 4.
So 80.
85, closer to 90, because the grade numbers go up a little bit as they go. We save space for kids to come in.
Data on Native Americans in the last 3, 4, 5 years of?
We do. I can give you some rough general.
We have a couple each year?
Because we're dealing with very small populations, the 4 years ago, we would have been about 4 times the rate in terms of placement in the AGIT program versus the percent of the population of American Indian students in the district. It was very high. And now it is smaller. That group of kids have essentially moved through, and other kids have not been identified and been placed since then. So the district was no better at student placement then when it had a significantly very high number than it is when it has a very low number, because we're dealing with very small populations. And that's the trick of all it. The percentages, one kid can constitute a 25% swing then if it's 4 kids in the program.
Yeah, I think back when the number that Tim's referencing is, there was a time in my daughter's class where there's 3. And then after this.
3 and third. There's 3 in one grade level. There was 5 total in the program at that time. Okay, but you're talking, again, less than 100 students.
So 2 would be high, 2 would be a high percent out of 80 for 2 to 3% total population? 2 students with 3, because we don't want to deal on a partial of a kid, and so let's round up to the full kid. But 3 kids would constitute now an equivalent of the amount of the population. It would mirror what the percent of the population is for the whole cohort. Okay.
So, and then if you, just a general comment is that then when you look at the students that actually completed the AGIT, of those American Indian students that actually completed it, which of those students were then counseled out? And there's a reality to that those American Indians did not complete that program. Just to move on to finish up my comments, it's a concern that as it relates to the American Indian student, for example, just to step back and make a quick illustration, when my daughters and my son play sports, my eldest, who's much taller than the other 2, will play a game and they'll play basketball, but she'll say that you can only take 1 step to the basket. Well, for her, the step is much more significant because she has twice the length of leg and whatnot. And the reality is when it relates to the American Indian student, the whole idea of blood quantum is a Western reality in terms of what's Indian and what's not. And Tim touched on a portion of that is we don't count them or track them if it's apparent if a student is half and half. And that's a reality that makes it tricky for American Indian students, but more important for American Indian.
Can we clarify on the we? That is a federal designation that generates that data. The district, we're trying very hard to identify each individual child.
Right.
So if they are half and half, they are or are not counted?
I'm trying to count them as both. I'm trying to generate a number that reflects the both, the yes and.
Sure. And right now, we just haven't got not just as a school district, even as a state in terms of the definition of a student, and even the struggle that we have here in our district, which we work hard to get beyond, is having parents define their child as American Indian student. But finally, I guess my general thought on that is again making, or from the Parent Advisory Committee, is just making sure that the American Indian students have that opportunity to access the AGIT program. There was a point when it was my daughter and another child that were the only American Indian students in the AGIT program for probably 3 years there. And that's significant, and that speaks a lot to our American Indian students, especially when Tim and I were at a meeting just the other day that there's 2 different parents who had students that that felt their child came from other districts who tested gifted and talented but couldn't find access to our AGIT program because of the testing. So ultimately, the concern that the Parent Advisory Committee might have is that if it's not accessible to students that are of color, then really what is the benefit of that program school-wide? We have made some efforts in terms of the poverty, which is significant.
The last 5 years, we've made significant changes in improvements in making sure that the process identifies appropriate candidates who are in poverty for placement. So if you go roll back about 6 years ago, it was between 8 and 9% of the students who were participating in the AGIT program were students of poverty. Through the effort of a then coordinator by the name of Mrs. Van Vickel, and who created the portfolio process, the original portfolio process, that number is now up to about 1 in 4. We still have a long way to go to get to 40%, but that's a significant change. We also know that students who are in poverty have opportunity gaps, which can create achievement gap opportunities. And through the processes that we want to do, we want to address the closure of those. For placement criteria, it is illegal to do race-based placement. That's not possible. It's not possible in general, nor is it possible with the civil rights agreement that we have in place with the Department of Education at this time. So what we're focusing on is trying to use the scoop of addressing needs in poverty as a way of drawing in more other groups because they are disproportionately represented in poverty. So the best thing that we can do for a group that has a high poverty rate is focus on poverty as a way of drawing them in. And that's what the district is intentionally doing.
And finally, my general thought, or my thought is just, if there's a test there that clearly acts as a gatekeeper to students of color right now. If they can't access that, can't get that score, they can't get into the portfolio. And that's a concern. And for American Indian parents, that's posing as a significant barrier. And that's really where this, in terms of being able to access the AGIT program right now. And that's really where the issue is. Tim and I have had multiple conversations about where this is, and the exciting thing is I think we'll continue to work towards that in terms of meeting the needs. But you're just kind of getting a quick.
There is no perfect way to place students in select programming of any kind.
When we go through that process, could we not have nationality at all on there, because
the placement
the intent, right, doesn't matter of color?
By rule, the placement process and portfolio is blind. So the committee that reviews the portfolio sees neither poverty, race, or name. Okay, students assigned a number and their data is provided to them fully redacted. So it's a blind selection process in its entirety. That's why I don't sit on the committee. I help organize the data, but therefore I would know, so I do not. The principal, Principal Sauer and his team go through the data provided and they look at the portfolios as a blind portfolio.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, Madam Chairperson, just my last comment is the one thing to keep in mind with when it comes to that type of standardized testing as the litmus test for whether or not a person is gifted or not, is that with the American Indian student, there's a lot of different realities to how the American Indian student processes. One thing I'll joke about with all of you is well, it's going to take me a while to process. I'm a processor. For example, my wife will chuckle with me. We're non-Indians, or people that are Western descent, are more linear, and you kind of get to the point with that comment, and you're seeing this even in terms of my conversation now. The American Indian student or individual is more circular in its conversation, so in its communication. So then you put that student in a testing setting where it's under a certain time, and they have to regurgitate and share information, and that isn't naturally how they're brought up. The template of learning and processing, that's my impact upon my children. That, along with other things in terms of the levity of it. The American Indian student isn't necessarily brought up to be prepared for those standardized tests, like, okay, Johnny or Janie, you need to be on your game today and do a really good job of this test, because this could have a significant impact on your academic future, or more importantly, be able to benefit you academically. The American Indian student doesn't necessarily have that, because with the American Indian student, education is still seen as something that doesn't have a lot of trust in the American Indian community. So there's a lot of different pieces like that are significant towards that standardized test and as it relates to the American Indian student. And And that's the same for other students of color as well. So it's easy to say, let's not include race, but there's some significant realities when it comes to taking that standardized test that makes it completely at a different level. And it's not exactly apples to apples when you put my child with another child and have them take that same standardized test.
I think that's fair to say with many testing procedures, whether it's the SAT, a lot of us will test but might know the knowledge because we have to process it regardless of color. So figuring out the best way of that is a challenge.
And I think that's really where Tim and I kind of smirk at one another is we've gone round and round and are still having conversations, sidebarred earlier. And I think as long as we remain professional and enjoy each other's company, hopefully we can get to a place that can.
Director Blacklands has been a historically strong supporter of the district. He has been a pleasure to work with. We do have our disagreements on details, but the core values of what we're attempting to do, particularly around the full mission of the district, we're in lockstep.
Awesome.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
Great, thank you, Tim. Okay, next up, new business. We're skipping the first one. It's postponed until April 15th or the 22nd. So moving along to the approval for awarding the apparent low bids as recommended in the bid package recommendation letter from the construction manager, which was handed to you tonight here, for Forest View Middle School project, and authorize the superintendent to execute the final contracts.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. We have a first from Director Haglund and a second from Director Nystrom. Discussion? I'm happy that they're all local people.
Yeah.
That's my only comment.
And this work will begin this spring and be completed by fall, correct?
Let's see, on Forest View, yes, it will. Yeah.
Okay.
It will, right, guys?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next up, the approval for awarding the apparent low bids as recommended in the bid package recommendation letter from the construction manager for the Harrison Elementary School project, and then authorize Superintendent Larson to execute the final contracts.
Also move.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. We have a first from Director Nelson, a second from Director Blacklands. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Approval for awarding the apparent low bids for the Phelan Heating and Roofing Incorporated as recommended in the bid package recommendation letter from the construction manager for Forest View Middle School and Harrison Elementary projects, to authorize Superintendent Larson to execute the contracts.
Also move.
Thank you.
A second.
Thank you. We have a first from Director Nystrom, a second from Director Blacklands. Any further discussion?
Madam Chair, due to conflict, I will abstain from voting.
Thank you. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, so we have 4 yes, 1 abstention. Moving on, approval of the printer lease agreement for 5 years with Marco. And I see Mercy coming to the microphone.
So our current copier contract is expiring at the end of this year. We originally went out for bid on that probably 5.5 years ago. We no longer have to go out for bids because we can get that same contract through Sourcewell. So they do all of the bidding and we just actually use their contract number. Sarah can speak to the service and the equipment that we're quite happy with. So what's before you is the Marco contract using the Sourcewell contract, if that makes sense.
Do you have any questions at all about it?
And as she discussed last time, it's about a savings of $13,000 every year for us.
That's great.
Yeah.
We have, do all of our printers do front, back, and scanning capability?
Yes,
And scanning?
correct.
Is there any education we can do with staff to do that, use those more, so we can cut down more costs? And
Yep, as I spoke about at our, at the technology update last time, we have cut significantly in the last year. We're very proud of that, about 1 million copies. And working with Brady at Marco, he really watches our statistics with me, with all of our data, and we continue to trend down, which is really exciting, and especially in our color, and that's really where we're getting the most of our savings, because we were seeing a big increase for a couple years. Now we're trending down again. We are also working with the Chromebooks coming in on the scanning capabilities and how to utilize those more, as well as we are doing some in-depth looking into our fax, what we're using for faxing right now versus scanning and things like that, because there's savings, cost savings there as well.
faxing, we still have fax machines?
Yes. Yes, we do. I can update you on that later.
It's just one step above Fred Flintstone's little bird that he had.
We don't have many, but we have a few still, so. Overall, though, we're very excited about this contract. Marco has been amazing to work with. The other nice thing about this is going with the Sourcewell contract, it cut out many hours of research and work on our staff. So we had a significant amount of savings there, as well as there won't need to be any staff training. All of the machines will look the same moving forward. So that is also significant time saving and cost savings for us.
When you think about the bid process, normally we would have to post for bids, have a bid date, similar to the construction process. So we're saving on time and money in this case. So it's a kind of a win-win.
Mm-hmm.
That's great.
Looks good.
I'll make the motion to approve the printer lease agreement for 5 years with Marco.
Thank you.
A second.
Thank you. We have a first from Director Nystrom, a second from Director Nelson. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Brainerd Public Schools Foundation report. Jenny Castle.
Hi.
Hi.
So in Reed's absence tonight, I get to give the foundation report. We're excited to announce at the foundation that we've changed up our Hall of Fame night. It's going to be after Senior Recognition Night on May 22nd. It is going to be at Forest View Middle School. We're looking forward to more connecting the Hall of Famers with current students to kind of showcase their achievements and success stories, so it's another way that we can bridge that. It used to be an off-site location where there wasn't a whole lot of interaction, so we're hoping for that, as well as they'll be invited, the Hall of Famers will be invited to go to the high school and talk to classes as they have in the past, so pretty excited about that. But the Brainerd Dispatch will be announcing the inductees on April 21st, so watch for that edition of the Dispatch. The ceremony is going to start at 5, and the reception to follow after that, and Senior Recognition Night will start at 7, where we are going to give away over $108,000 again in scholarships to deserving seniors. So pretty excited about that. Tickets, you'll all be invited. Jessica Gangle will send out tickets, are $15 to the Hall of Fame, and then free for Senior Recognition Night. And yeah, that's it.
Great.
Any questions? Okay, thanks.
Business Services report.
So in your packet is the enrollment report. As of last month, we are down 16 students. Lane and I were actually talking about this earlier today. A little concerning, but we're hoping at the end of the year, the ADMs shake out a little bit better just because of the higher number that were at the beginning of the year. So hopefully next month we can see that number stabilize a little bit. And then as noted, the check register will be at next meeting. Apologize, with the transition, just need to verify some things. And then on that note too, we did have interviews last week, so hopefully we can get a candidate in here soon. That's all I have.
Quick question.
Sure.
Are we notified when a student is leaving the district, or do they just
Drop out.
disappear?
Depends on every situation.
But for the majority of them, do we know? I mean,
Majority, yes, but I know that there are some students that we just don't see, and eventually after, I think it's 15 days, they have to be unenrolled out of our system.
I wonder if there'd be any value in collecting that data, just, if we had why, like, I think I noticed the first grade that we were down 5. Can we just find out, did they move out of town or whatever it might be?
Mm-hmm.
Actually, since the last time we had this report and you asked for that, Sue Anderson has been pulling that information together for us every month.
Mm-hmm.
And so we can continue to update it and have it available to look at, absolutely.
Yeah, it has where they went, if they went to another school district, if they went out of state. I can get you that report.
Yep.
Okay.
That'd be great.
Yep.
Could you get that to all of us, or what?
I think I gave you a copy last meeting.
Yeah, I think you did.
Yeah.
Well, maybe you could share that with me.
I remember we were supposed to see Sue Anderson to get more information.
Yeah, I think that'd be helpful.
Okay. Sounds good.
We will do that. We'll continue to keep adding on to that as changes happen with our enrollment. So, yep.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Marcy. Superintendent's report.
All right, many things that we've already talked about, and so one of the things I had is that we had some great interviews last week, and so hopefully we get Marcy some help real soon, and so she's really done a nice job through this transitional time, and so that'll be great. Also, last week we spent a significant amount of time. I think we had 3 nights where we had meetings at the Baxter City Hall, and one where we were at the Brainerd City Hall, trying to take care of all the behind-the-scenes things that have to happen to make some of these building projects a reality, and everything's going really well. And so we will keep, as we get the pieces of information, we will continue to keep the board informed and the public informed as well. Also, last week, it was very interesting because at Sourcewell, they held the first ever job fair. And I know Marcy and Heidi both attended there, and did a lot of fun activities trying to recruit teachers and such to the school district. There were 47 really high-quality candidates. Everyone that's talked about that were part of the job fair at Sourcewell said it was just a wonderful opportunity. In fact, it was interesting because I had the superintendent meeting the next morning, and superintendents were still fighting over candidates. So it was really a wonderful experience, and we thank Sourcewell for bringing this opportunity and making it available so that candidates can go around and meet with people from many of the school districts within our region. So I think this is a great step. Thanks to Mary Klom for organizing this and making this hopefully something that's happens yearly for our school districts.
Where was it held again?
It was at Sourcewell.
And
Yeah, yep. The next day, as I said, I had a meeting, superintendent meeting at Sourcewell, and Dr. Gary Amorosa was there from MASSA, and Gary Lee and Kirk Schneider-Wind from MSBA. And there was a lot of talk about where the legislature is right now. The Senate and the House are quite separate in what the amounts are for education, but once again, they still talk about the fact that everybody is really valuing the process, and it just kind of depends upon what they believe the forecast for the finances are in the future, but we'll keep everyone informed as we learn more about that. Today, Marcy and I had a meeting with Ellers and with the we had a ratings conference with Standards and Poor's. And if you remember about, maybe 6-8 months ago, we had to do that, maybe a year ago now. We had to do it before the referendum to see what our ratings were and, how we were looking financially and such. Well, today we had an updated meeting with Corey and with Greg Crow and so on, and it's looking really positive. They're very impressed with many of the changes, the monthly reports that Marcy is doing, some of the changes that the district has made to accommodate what they talked to us about a year ago. And so I forget the date. Is it April 22nd that they'll sell the bonds, and then we'll know a lot more after that. A couple of things that we will talk about. Again, project oversight team tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock, and bid opening for the new elementary school tomorrow. Keep your fingers crossed that I see Tammy back there. She's looking nervous like Kathy was last week. Kathy's jumping for joy yet, so she's very, yeah, so we're very excited about tomorrow, and so please, everyone's welcome. It's an open meeting. Also, this Friday, the Family Services Collaborative meeting, or the Paul Bunyan Education Cooperative Board of Delegates meeting has been postponed because of a conflict that came up. And then next Monday, we will have a special board meeting at 11 o'clock, if that works for the board members. The items that we hope to have on that agenda on Monday are to approve the NISWA bids, and we hope to get some great information tomorrow at Project Oversight on what we feel are the priorities and such in that process, if we should go a little bit beyond the base bid or a recommendation that I can move forward. Hopefully we'll have everything ready for design development at the high school. We're counting on that'll be ready for Monday. Also, we are going to have an update on the new elementary school in Baxter, and then some staffing, and hopefully we'll be able to hire an accountant at that time to help out in the business office. So big agenda for a 1-hour meeting, which will be held, we'll go really fast too, I promise. So for Monday, and at 11 or 12, whatever the Board of Education decides. So that's my report for this evening.
Thank you. I think you covered all here the future board meetings.
Good.
So we are going to move into closed session. The meeting will be closed pursuant to Minnesota Statutes 13D.03 for labor negotiation strategy, and pursuant to Minnesota Statutes 13.44 to discuss appraised values of private property and negotiations for the purchase of that property, and 13D.05 subdivision 3 for data classified as not public, to develop or consider offers or counter offers for the purchase or sale of real or personal property. And you can see the addresses are listed here on Oak Street. Is there a motion to go into closed session?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Second. First from Nystrom, second from Blacklance. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. We are going into closed session. It's 7:40.